Hello everybody, welcome back to the Talking City podcast with your multimedia and YouTube host Conor McGilligan, and I am joined as always by your chief Manchester City writer Simon Bajkowski. Si, how you doing mate, alright?
Yeah, good, definitely not always, I'm off on holiday soon.
Oh, yeah,
That's why I'm going to Turkey. Yeah, do you want the address?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah.
Lovely place, I've heard.
Yes, yeah, should be very nice and sunny, which is what we want.
Which is what we need at the minute, isn't it? So, City back in action. We'll get straight into it over the weekend. What a game!
It was great. It was really, really good. The first half was decent, but the second half it sort of got a bit basketball-y and end-to-end and chances, and it was like, yes, you can imagine kind of Guardiola having a bit of a fit about how open it was, but yeah, I was sat there just sort of, this is great. This is a really, really good game, and City came out on top. So fair play to them.
Yeah, it felt box office really. I don't know what happened, but it's sort of. I mean, City obviously controlled it, didn't they? For the first part of the game, it was very. I felt anyway, it was just a matter of time. But then West Ham slowly started to come into it. And I don't know why, I just didn't expect it. I thought the game overall was going to just be one of those performances where I flicked on the channel. I thought I sort of like rolled my eyes. I thought, because this is just going to be a classic City win.
Yeah,
but it wasn't as straightforward as we all anticipated, was it? Especially that first half.
No, and City kind of dominated, but they started really well, City, and you were like, yeah, this is going to be a textbook City performance. And then from nowhere, really, West Ham just had sort of one chance and then another chance, and City were 1-0 down. And it was like, we've kind of been here before with, like I was saying, last week, West Ham kind of have this knack of just undoing City, really. At the London Stadium, they just play really, really well. Moyes said afterwards he reckons that was the best West Ham have played kind of on the ball against City. They just kind of made a few mistakes off it. But from 1-0 down, you've then got to say real tremendous credit to City for coming back and scoring 3 second half goals and taking the result, because it could have been a West Ham win, could have been a draw quite easily. So yeah, it was, football was the winner, but also City were the winners.
Yeah, 100%. I think it was, obviously we have to speak about the lineup. Jeremy Doku, the big talking point at the start. What were your initial thoughts? Were you thinking to yourself, okay, or were you thinking, I'd prefer him to... I was having a quick look online. A lot of City fans were wanting him to sort of bed in and then maybe just come off the bench for the next however many games and really settle himself in, like we've seen with City players before. But you don't really see that frequently, especially with offensive players, him slotting in straight away in a 90-minute game,
No, it was really interesting, and I think had Grealish been available, Grealish would have played. And I think because of the injuries, we were kind of at a point where it was like either Núñez or Doku are going to have to start. And I kind of thought Doku would, but still it was interesting that sort of not only did he start, but he had sort of license to run at his fullback and lose the ball whenever he wanted. And sort of, you look at the West Ham goal, Doku kind of loses possession and then Guardiola's nutmegs and he's out of position and West Ham score, and you're like, right, you've got 2 new signings here who aren't kind of adept at what Guardiola wants. But then both of them had played well up to that point and then played really well after, and Doku, gets the equaliser and just plays really, really well. Even, Pep after the game was like, I did not expect that, I've got to be honest. Like, I saw him in his first game, he was shy. Young kid coming into the treble winners, did not expect that in his second game. And he just, really, really exciting, and fans are going to love him because he is what you want, right? He gets you off your seat because he takes defenders on and he runs at them and he cuts in and scores goals. So, very, very promising.
Yeah, he looked really sharp, didn't he? I mean, I was watching it, and it's interesting. We'll speak a little bit more about this in Act 2 in comparison, Doku and Grealish and how that's going to shape up. But he was just electrifying, wasn't he? And I felt every time he got the ball, I mean, it was a coup foul, wasn't it? Really having problems with him. He sort of got to grips with him a little bit, but that battle was really interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Moyes said afterwards, he was like, oh, you know, Kufal did really well. It was just that one time, and you think it was a few more times than that. And Pep said afterwards, you know, we just said run at him, and if you don't feel like it's on, give it back to Guardiola and we'll start again. But what was really promising from Doku's point of view was that, you know, he had so much success, so most of the time when he thought to run at him, he could, and he took him on and he beat him. And so his decision making was really good, and that is very good, because I know sort of, you know, when City signed him, one of the things was, you know, how is his final product, how is his decision making in the final third, is it going to be up to scratch? And they thought, well, he can learn. But that is some pretty fast learning if he can do that. And City are going to come up against a lot of teams who defend deep against them, and someone like Doku could be absolute dynamite for unlocking that.
Especially with the injuries that they faced going into that game. Obviously, Kovacic and Grealish being the main ones, Stones as well. It's impressive, wasn't it? Really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, you looked at the bench and they didn't have all 9 subs on, and they had 2 goalkeepers in the 8 that were on the bench, and then so we had Ortega, Carson, Lewis, Gomez, Ake, Phillips, Nunes and Bob. So Bob is kind of the only attack-minded player on that bench, and he's not started any Premier League games. So, you know, this isn't a sort of boo-hoo, Man City have it really bad, because they've deliberately chosen to have a squad this small, and they've got a lot of quality in the players that they do have. But it shows that just 4 injuries, and not even sort of that many attacking injuries, but, you know, you lose Grealish and you lose De Bruyne, and then even Kovacic is enough for them to look really quite depleted. So it was kind of like, it was a really good comeback from the team, but it kind of needed to be those 11 players that had gone behind, because there wasn't really anyone on the bench that could change the game in their favour.
Yeah, thought Walker was really good. Really, really good. A few, I don't really know, I mean, maybe you can clear this up for me. Where was he playing?
So yeah, he pretty much had the right side to himself, as he's had a few games, but then he could kind of cut in as well. It is one of those kind of, when he's obviously been at City for so long and is so ingrained in kind of what Guardiola wants, he just kind of knows where to be in the right place. But this season he's kind of taken on a new dimension to his game. He looks even faster somehow than he has been. And yeah, just really, it was a very good team performance, basically. You know, the sort of 2 at fault for the goal, you could say, played really well otherwise, and Haaland should have scored 4 or 5, but did still score, and also got himself into those positions where you'd think, well, every other week of the season he would score 4 or 5, so you can't really be too harsh on him.
Yeah, I thought he wasn't quiet as such, but as you've said, you know, the chances missed, you did think, I mean, when it was 1-1, I did think to myself, there might be a point, it just might be one of those games where West Ham are able to hold out, and they looked, it's interesting you mentioned in possession as well. I mean, obviously Edson Alvarez in there, Paqueta as well. I thought he looked very good. He looked very good, and you can see, because it was almost any time he had the ball, City with that press, instant press, and he was able to resist that press a lot of the time. I think it was a really nice moment where and this isn't a Paqueta sort of like channel or anything, but he gets the ball, and I think he wins it off Rodri, and he swivels and plays the ball through to Antonio, and you thought, right, there is a player there.
Yeah. No, he did very well, and Alvarez did, and again, you know, Alvarez ended up going off in the second half quite early, because he'd been booked and he'd spoken with Moyes at half time, sort of a bit of a worry, and he gave a free kick away on the edge of the box, so they were like, we don't want him getting sent off, so they took him off. But they did lose a bit in that midfield when they went off, and I think that sort of did help City to sort of finally take the lead. for the first time. But yeah, it was it was a really good effort from West Ham, and even when they conceded, you know, they go up the other end, and Edison makes some really good saves to keep City level. So from back to front, really, for City, it was good. You know, considering they beat Fulham 5-1, that performance on Saturday was so much better.
When Alvarez had that free kick, were you thinking to yourself, what are you doing? Don't shoot. Don't shoot. And then what an effort. I mean, he was exceptional again.
Yeah, it was a long way out. But again, he's just involved. And again, afterwards, they were like, you know, because everyone saw the oxygen that the Argentina players had to cope with sort of being in Bolivia in midweek. And then I sort of thought, well, you know, Alvarez, he might not start, so, you know, it's intensity, but and then he started for Argentina. I think he came back late Thursday. City really didn't think he'd be involved, or certainly not start, because he'd done that. But he was just like, no, I can play, and I will play. And then he played like that. So that's been a real big plus for him. And Pep was really blunt about him on Friday. You know, he was asked kind of, why is Alvarez starting so much? And he was like, because De Bruyne's injured. It wasn't necessarily like, oh, because he's really good or he's earned it. Or it was like, because De Bruyne's injured. But he said, but he has taken his opportunity, and he really has. And after Saturday's game, Pep was like, yeah, he's pretty much undroppable.
Which is a massive indictment, that, from Pep.
Yeah. But it's like... yeah, I mean, he's in that sort of same central space as Foden, really, and he is pretty much winning the battle of who's shining the most at the minute.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
That is, I mean, that's going to be a contest, sort of in-house competition to watch over the season, but two pretty special players to have in behind Haaland.
I guess it's that it's not a Foden's playing badly at the minute, but it is the thing with Alvarez. It's the consistency, isn't it? And we were speaking at the start of the season on here about just his contributions when it comes to just, you know, the minutes per goal contributions, and it's not just that for me. It's his general influence on proceedings. Like you said, he's like a Duracell bunny, but he's got quality as well, real quality. And I think he's just showing a bit of a higher level.
Yeah, I'm a bit conflicted with Alvarez, because I sort of. He obviously does so much off the ball, which is why Guardiola and City like him so much. But at the same time, one of the things I'd say about his time at City is he's kind of struggled to stay involved across the 90 minutes. And there will be kind of large spells where he doesn't appear to be doing very much. And say with Haaland, that can be the case, and then he'll bang in 2 or 3 and you're like, fair enough. Now Alvarez is having more goals and assists, and he's becoming like this like fantasy league kind of must-have because of his goals and assists, and I don't know whether that is kind of overinflating his performance levels for someone who doesn't quite stay in the game for all the 90 minutes, but at the same time he does a load of stuff that you don't necessarily notice over the 90 minutes that kind of doesn't get picked up on as well. So he's kind of being like over and under appreciated at the same time. But this is, you know, his best moment for City.
And just to cap off the game, what do you think was said at half time? Because I know they were in that first sort of 15 minutes, they were dominant, they were completely dominant, and they were really for the first half. The West Ham came into it on the counter-attacks in the transition, I thought, but second half, obviously, Doku got the goal within about 40 seconds, but they just, that level. And I thought then, I thought, wow, that's the scary side of City, really. You've gone from a point of second, third gear, and they've just literally stepped it up at the half-time. You just wonder what Pep... I mean, is it right that I think it was there was a BT Sport interview afterwards, and they said at half-time Pep wasn't happy or something like that. I might be paraphrasing, but they went in and there was obviously a rocket shoved up. So. Well,
I don't know. I kind of heard the message from the dressing room was like, just carry on. Just like you're playing really well. Keep it up. And I think They got. I'm not saying the goal was lucky, but I think they got lucky that sort of they scored so early. I don't think they were expecting to kind of come out and be like, yeah, it's 1-1 after 46 minutes.
Just a moment of brilliance, wasn't it?
Yeah. And from then on, they were like, oh yeah, we are playing well, we can take this. The other thing I would say is Bernardo Silva kind of moved out from the middle to the right wing for that second half and was exceptional. It's like, just... He is another one who's in really, really good form, and can play anywhere. And he's one of those guys who, he can give you a half alongside Rodri and play really well and break up every West Ham attack, and then he'll just switch out to the right and win you the game in the second half. And he's always noticeable when he gets in among the goals. And he got a bit of luck with Aguerd. It was missing the header, but he was in the space and took it well, and a sort of lovely scoop over the top from Alvarez for it. So, and then he kind of runs on and makes the right pass to give it to Haaland for the third. So, players stepping up, I would say, and delivering.
That's going to be it for Act 1, guys. We'll be back with Act 2 in just a second. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Talking City podcast. I wanted to leave this to sort of like the second half really side, but Doku versus Jack Grealish now, that is so interesting, because you mentioned tactically in the first half about Doku almost just being that sort of electrifying player and just going at the defender. Now, Grealish kind of used to do that for Aston Villa, but when he's been in a Man City shirt, I feel personally it's been a lot of, at the very start he was doing a lot of check backs, playing it back, retaining possession, and I felt he wasn't really as explosive as we saw Doku initially at the weekend. It's going to be fascinating to see that dynamic. Do you think Grealish comes straight back in when he's fully fit over someone like Doku?
I think so. I think I've seen like a lot of negativity towards Grealish, kind of partly in relation to Doku being good, but also just generally sort of, just silly nonsense really, that kind of forgets how important he is to the attack and the team, and sort of, him and Ake on that left side last season were brilliant, and there were, from January to April probably, Grealish was the best player in the team. So it's kind of like, he still gives a lot. I don't, maybe I'm just misremembering it. I don't remember him being like a tricky dribbler in the same way that Doku is, when he was at Aston Villa. I think of him carrying the ball forward a lot, maybe more kind of De Bruyne kind of levels, but I don't think he's ever going to be that winger that like takes on his man. I don't think he's got the pace really to do that. So I still kind of think the big games, and when you go into Arsenal away, which they're playing next month, and then the month after it's Chelsea away and Liverpool away, and then they've got United away around that time as well. You don't want to be giving the ball away too easily. Guardiola certainly doesn't want to be giving the ball away too easily. Who's the best at keeping the ball in the team? Jack Grealish. Now, what Doku does offer is that unpredictability, and like we were talking about West Ham, they didn't have any options off the bench. Now, if you've got two very different players who can play on that left wing, you can sort of mix and match depending on the opposition. It may be for some big games that the message is attack, and the best way to attack is with a tricky winger, and that would be when Grealish might have to fight for his place or be on the bench. But I think, I don't know. The thing is, Doku's really interesting because he's not the Pep player that we're used to seeing, or that this team has become over the last 2 or 3 years. It's more kind of your Leroy Sané from 2017, 2018. So things might change, but at the minute I still think kind of Grealish will play when he's fit.
But we talk a lot offensively as well, but defensively now, there's a lot of competition, isn't there? You know, I was thinking as well, obviously that left side, you're looking like Gvardiol and Ake. There's now, you're looking at it, and when the majority of that back line's fit, which hopefully it's going to be very, very soon, Pep's got some real decisions to make, hasn't he?
Yeah, he does. I sort of think with the amount of games that are coming, no one's going to really be left out. And that's probably true with, you know, the left wing and other spots as well. But like, I'd be surprised if there was someone like, you know, like Laporte didn't play for like the last 4 months basically, or last season. I'd be surprised if that happened, and unless it gets to the point where kind of someone is consistently being left out for the big games, and is unhappy with that, I sort of think there will be enough game time for everyone in that defence.
Yeah, definitely. I think I guess the only one you're still looking at and thinking he's going to be playing most games, it's Rodri, isn't it? You feel like there's rotation everywhere, but it's still Rodri, isn't it?
Yeah. Rodri and Diaz are likely to play more than anyone else, I think. But then, you know, Pep talks about Calvin Phillips on Friday, and we know Calvin Phillips has, you know, not really started a meaningful game for City. I think there was that absurd stat during the international break that he's started as many games for England as he has for City since he moved. It
was 4 and 3, wasn't it?
Yeah, and Pep talks about, you know, the club suggesting to him that did he want to go on loan in summer, and he said no, he wanted to stay and fight for his place, and that will have done him good, and playing for England will have done him good. And you know, they've got this Carabao Cup game at Newcastle that might be an ideal time for him to step into it. There was actually sort of a bit of a thinking that maybe Phillips could have played alongside Rodri at West Ham. You know, if you didn't want to go for Doku or Nunes, maybe you play kind of Phillips in sort of instead of the Bernardo Silva role, I guess that ended up being. But he's more in the frame than he was. So,
well, I think it's also important to say that for England, to say he'd had no minutes, I thought he was very good.
Yeah, he was. And it's kind of not about almost him individually. You know, we'd had this, you know, the huge debate around England in the first game was, you know, Rice, Foden, Bellingham was the midfield three that everyone wanted to see. And it ended up being Rice, Henderson and Bellingham, and Southgate kind of confused the situation with sort of leaning on Pep, but ultimately it seemed to be that he was saying, you know, I can't just have Rice as defensive cover and leave Foden and Bellingham up top. Whereas you brought Phillips in, who knows how to play alongside Rice and works alongside Rice very well, and Bellingham had more freedom and a better game, really. So it's like in bringing Phillips into the team, you allow other players to play better. So that may not always be the case at City, but there will be times, in the same way that kind of Kovacic looks to have kind of nailed down this partnership with Rodri, where Phillips can slip in, and you know, maybe with injuries or whatever, you don't always have Alvarez and Foden available, or maybe one of them moves to the bench for certain games and you let the other one be in a more advanced position, knowing that you've got that kind of extra cover with Phillips.
Yeah, it's not a bad point. I mean, we'll get onto Red Star in a little bit, but maybe he's one who you're looking at and thinking...
Yeah, quite possibly.
Yeah, and there should be a few there, shouldn't there, really?
Yeah.
You've touched on him a little bit. I just wanted to briefly mention him. Bernardo.
Yeah.
Proceed.
I mean, yeah, well, the thing is, we've spoken so much about Kyle Walker in recent weeks, and he's absolutely deserved it, but kind of as important for staying this season has been Bernardo Silva. Getting him to sign a contract extension is a bonus, but him staying is huge. And in the same way that, no one at the club or no one in the world really has what Walker can offer as a right back, and what he's shown this season, there isn't really anyone who can perform so many roles in the City team and also in the City squad. I asked Pep about it after the game at West Ham, and he kind of said, like, you can substitute players in for these guys, but you can't substitute like their characters, and their kind of role in the dressing room is so important. Obviously Walker's one of the leadership group, but Bernardo isn't. But his kind of role as kind of the joker and the one that they all pick on and everything is like a huge part of the team and the squad, and everyone loves him. And when he's playing like that, you can sort of, it is a madness that they've not had more serious offers for him sort of ever, because he plays so well. He is, you're looking at, I don't know, I don't think they'd have sold him for under 80 this summer, and I don't think that would have been unreasonable. Bernardo Silva had gone for 80 million this summer. I don't think anyone would have said, oh, that's a lot.
I think with a lot, I don't know if you agree, but I think with a lot of teams, maybe sort of like Barca aside in terms of system-wise, I don't know where he'd fit in anywhere, because it's like, what is he?
Yeah.
What is Bernardo Silva? It's like, is he a right back, left back, centre back?
Yeah, which is fair, but he would probably do a very good job anywhere, like in any of those positions.
Yeah.
But, stick him in centre mid for a season and he'll be great. Stick him at right wing for a season and he'll be great. But if you want to stick him at centre mid for 20 minutes, right wing for 30 minutes, and then left back for 40, he'll be great as well. So he really is just a hugely intelligent player, and that means he could kind of fit in anywhere.
Definitely. Guys, we're going to be back talking rivals, Red Star Belgrade, and score predictions in just a sec. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Talking City podcast. Si, Red Star Belgrade coming up. You excited about this one? Champions League starting again?
Yeah, it's nice to have it back again. It don't feel like 2 minutes since we were in Istanbul watching the final. It's kind of, we're all excited to see what happens next for City. Can't quite talk about it in this podcast, but there's something on the site on Monday night, Tuesday evening about what the expectations are from within the club for the Champions League going forward, and it's kind of, we've seen the club CEO talk about sort of he's expecting this competition to be a bit easier this season because City finally got that monkey off the back and won it. The pressure's off for them in a sense, and there's a Guardiola press conference later today, and nobody is going to ask him, why haven't you won the Champions League yet, because he's won it. So it should be easier for them in that sense, but they've got to just go again. And in the same way that there's kind of a natural drop off when you win the Premier League, how motivated are they going to be, especially for a group stage and group games where there aren't really any teams that you would kind of expect them to lose to, but there are 3 teams that could kind of trip them up if they're not concentrating properly.
Yeah, we were speaking on the last one where obviously the results away in Leipzig the last 2 times haven't been great, but I mean they've not been disastrous, but they're probably the only ones at the minute where you're looking and thinking they might bloody City's nose, but with how strong City look at the minute, it's...
Yeah, I think, you look at the last 3 games for City and they've conceded a goal in each of them, and you sort of think that was, there are times where City have been vulnerable in moments in games, but they've always been strong enough to overcome that in the league. Will that still be the case in the Champions League? And what will the atmosphere be like on Tuesday night? Will it be like, a huge celebration, first Champions League game back after Istanbul, or will it be a bit kind of like Red Star is quite a come down from Istanbul, and the next final that everyone will be hoping to go to is a long way away.
It is indeed. Doku, Nunes, Calvin Phillips you mentioned previously, maybe some. Are you expecting a little bit of rotation for this one, or are you expecting City to go full strength?
Before we started this podcast, I probably thought full strength, and now you've kind of put a few rotation thoughts in my head. I think it will be strong because Pep will want to start the Champions League off well. He won't want to kind of risk anything but 3 points. The formula for going through and topping the group kind of remains: win all 3 home games and then pick up points away from home. So it will be strong, and you'd expect Haaland and Alvarez and Foden and all these players to play. With the injury situation, you'd probably expect a similar 11 to West Ham, but that kind of spot that Doku had, I think you'd probably play him again. But I wouldn't be surprised if Nunes or Phillips came in for that second for that spot, to give City a bit more structure.
Yeah, I don't think you'll be losing that much putting a Calvin Phillips in there against the Red Star Belgrade without any disrespect.
Yeah. So, and Bernardo can play wide, Foden can play wide, so it could easily be done. So, yeah, but it has to be a strong team because they don't really have any choice.
But Pep will be wanting a statement as well, won't he? You got against Red Star Belgrade, blow them away. The whole world's going to be looking at the champions anyway. But if you go out and put a real statement down, they're going to be thinking, okay, City is still there.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And you win by 2 or 3 goals, you probably top the group after one game, which doesn't really matter. But like you say, it's just a statement, and you just stay there, and you're there from the start, and you carry it through. So it's going to be one of those games where Pep is really going to be looking at his players, because we all want to know, have they still got that motivation? And it won't be in games like this where it's kind of decided, but it's games like this that Pep's watching the players, saying like, well, are they going the extra mile against Red Star? Because everyone will go the extra mile against Real Madrid, but I want to see who's going the extra mile tonight to know who I play against Real Madrid.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously the press conference is coming out, will be coming up later on today. We're recording early Monday morning. But long-term injury-wise, I guess the same faces are still going to be out. I don't know if there's going to be any sort of major breaks from Pep Guardiola. I mean,
no, I'd be surprised if anyone's back for Tuesday. There might be, somebody maybe back in training. But I don't think there'll be sort of anyone who's fit enough to come kind of straight back into the team for Tuesday night. So, like I say, you're probably looking at the same 11, 12, 13 players that you're going to choose 11 from.
Score prediction?
I think 3-1.
You're always quite conservative with your score prediction.
I think they'll have a moment.
Am I going to go with 4 again?
Who knows? Well, do you know what? It was. I was sat there at West Ham at 1-0, and when they were 1-1 against Sheffield United, might be a bit boring, but an insight into my daily life. It's a 1,000-word match report, and sometimes you have to. Sometimes it's easy and it's 2 or 3-0 after 20 minutes and you can think, I can probably sort of know the way the match is going. Other times it's not, and you've got to wait until 80, 85 minutes, but you can't write 1,000 words in 5 minutes, so you've got to kind of write some of it beforehand, obviously, sort of as the match is going on. And, I think at Sheffield United I was writing how good the defence was, and then they conceded it after 83, and you're like, oh, right, we start again. And you sort of like, at Sheffield United, they had injury problems and they're not always great, and you're like, things have kind of caught up with them. Like, they were always going to drop points early on, and this is how it is. And then they went and won the game. So you forget about that. At West Ham, at 1-0 at half-time, you're thinking, right, well, they can't name a full bench. They're playing a good team. Haaland's missed 2 chances he should have buried. One of those days, this is kind of shows that the squad is depleted and, they are running the risk of dropping points while it's like this. And then they go and win the game. So, the performances haven't all been terrific, but they've still done enough to win games, which, the last time I remember it being like this was the Centurion season when they, won, when they got 100 points. So that's a good sign. But I still think there's kind of weaknesses in them in game that can be got at, and Champions League teams do tend to get at them. But I think they'll have too much for Red Star.
Yeah, I think 3-0. I think they'll go 3-0. I think they'll keep another clean sheet. Quickly before we finish, I just want to laugh at a few of the rivals. Manchester United do Manchester United things again. Losing 3-1 to Bray. We have to start there, obviously.
Yeah. So when City were at West Ham last season was the first day of last season, and by coincidence, the United had Brighton at home, and United were the early game, so it was on in the press room before the game, and it was thinking oh my God, United are getting torn apart here. They've got a new manager, but nothing's changed. There was less surprise on Saturday. It was just United are losing again.
Is that because they're what they are at the minute, or do you think it's because people just, for some reason, still don't give Brighton enough credit?
Well, I think maybe a bit of both. I think, I would still look at United versus Brighton and think, well, that should be a home win. And maybe that is underestimating how...
It's coming closer now, isn't it?
Yeah, but what more convinces me that United will not be close to challenging City is what Ten Hag says. And, I'm not that close to United, so it might be that he says things in press conferences that don't reflect what he thinks or whatever. But City beat him in the FA Cup final, and Ten Hag afterwards was oh yeah, the game could have gone either way. Yeah, the gap's not that big between the two teams. And you're thinking
have you seen what City have just won?
City really didn't play well in the FA Cup final, but still just looked like sort of a bigger boy with a younger brother, playing in the park, just keeping them away all the time. And then, for Ten Hag to come out after the Brighton game and say well, both teams have spent money, so, and you're yeah, technically, but I think it went round the Brighton team cost 17 million or something, and they just absolutely schooled United. United have got some good fixtures coming up, but I would have included Brighton at home as a good fixture for them, and 6 points from 15.
Not good, is it? You've got to pick it up, boys. You predicted that Liverpool were going to be City's closest.
Still want to keep this quite quiet in case it doesn't go.
But they look good.
They look good. Again. They look good. And it's another, I've talked before about them coming, responding from poor starts. And a bit City have had some iffy starts or iffy moments in games. Liverpool have had them. Liverpool were dreadful in the first half, really, against Wolves and should have been completely out of it. But they stayed in the game, in part to them, but also because Wolves didn't finish well enough. And then they won 3-1. So, it's always when my predictions turn out all right. And Liverpool will be very happy. And they have got some very good fixtures for the next 5, 6, 8 games, I think. So, they'll be looking to kick on.
Arsenal too, good win, really good win. I think I heard a stat, I think it was on the Sky Sports podcast that they do, that the London clubs have just, I think it's Arsenal in particular, but they've got a terrible record on Merseyside, Liverpool and Everton. Yeah, big win for them, I think.
Well, I don't think Arsenal had won at Goodison since Wenger left, so it was a huge win, and also kind of the big talking point before the game was dropping Ramsdale, which was huge from Arteta. I don't think you can't sign someone like David Raya and then say, oh well, he's never going to play. I think it was always expected, but to do it as he'd done when Ramsdale's not really done anything wrong, that is the sign of a manager in control of his squad and a manager who's ready to make big decisions to succeed. So yeah, I mean I think the top four is Arsenal, Liverpool, and Spurs behind City. Spurs winning well. I wouldn't expect necessarily Spurs to keep it up, but they've started really well. And Arsenal and Liverpool looking strong. Arsenal City in a few weeks is going to be very tasty.
Thanks for that, Si. That's going to be it for us, everyone, at the Talking City podcast. Make sure you check out the European supplement. The link will be in the description below. You can get it for £3. Everybody previews all the Champions League games. Really appreciate you stopping by. Can get us on YouTube, like, comment and subscribe over there. Leave us a 5-star rating on all of your favourite podcast providers. And we're going to link over now to Joe Bray, who's going to be giving you a little bit of a preview from the Etihad, discussing everything that's going on with City. And also we're going to link into Pep Guardiola's press conference. See you in a bit.
Hello there, welcome to Manchester City open training ahead of City versus Red Star Belgrade in the Champions League. It's City's first game in the Champions League since they won it, of course, last year. First game as defending European champions. Thankfully, as you can see, the weather is much better than it was earlier today when it was an absolute downpour. We're expecting City to be out training very shortly. They should be without Mateo Kovacic and Jack Grealish. Once again, they missed the win over West Ham and don't appear to be ready again. Guardiola said that they're not going to be playing against Red Star, and they had doubts for Nottingham Forest at the weekend. John Stones is definitely out, Kevin De Bruyne is out long term, as we know. We heard from Pep and Kyle Walker. Kyle Walker confirmed that City's vote for the new captains. The captains leadership group has taken place, and Bernardo Silva is one of the new captains. He is sort of the only new one. Obviously, Ilkay Gundogan departed, so it's still Walker, De Bruyne, Rodri, Ruben Dias, and now it's Bernardo Silva. Walker was a little bit coy on who was the actual club captain. In the past, they've made it clear who is the captain. Obviously, it was Gundogan. Before that, it's Fernandinho. This time, he said the order doesn't matter. So I don't know whether we want to read into that maybe it's Kevin De Bruyne when he comes back. We can't really say for sure, but what we do know is Walker will probably almost certainly wear the armband until De Bruyne gets back, and then we'll wait and see. But yeah, for now, Walker is the main captain in the group. That vote has taken place. Maybe Guardiola will go into a little bit more detail next time we see him in probably after the Red Star game now. Guardiola was pretty good, I've got to say, when he was talking about City's mentality and how it changes when you are defending the European Cup rather than winning it. This time every season he is asked, do you feel under more pressure to win the Champions League for the first time? This time the questions were, do you feel under more pressure defending it? He said it was easier to defend it rather than win it for the first time. Now they've done it, but he also said it's a new slate, everything's done. If they wanted an easy journey, they'd be on the beach, and this time they want to go and become one of those clubs that win it 2, 3, 4 times. Not many teams defend the Champions League, especially when they've won it the first time. City want to be one of the teams who do that. Guardiola said when he was at Barcelona he was proud to have won 2 Champions Leagues, but of course they won 2 in 4 years rather than any back-to-back. So he wants to do that. Kyle Walker said the players definitely want to do that and feel the pressure of doing that and embrace that pressure. Walker said that Guardiola showed the players a picture of a mountain at the start of the season before the first game and said, your flag's up there at the top, you've been to the top, you are the treble winners, you're the European champions, but you are at the bottom and you've got to work your way back up there. So far we've seen City do that. We heard from Rodri after the game at West Ham and said they're doing the impossible at the moment by winning so many games and playing so well with so many players out, and he said they're going to be stronger when these players return. They're going to have to sort of limp along at the moment. The group stage in the Champions League is a favourable one for City, and I suppose that does mean that they are able to rotate the few players that they do have. Guardiola even said he's going to have to play the kids at Newcastle in the Carabao Cup next week. Whether he does that or not, whether it's a figure of speech, we will wait and see. But the longer that Kovacic, Grealish, Stones remain out, the fewer options City have in midfield. I'm wondering, does Matheus Nunes come in? I thought he was very, very good when he came off the bench at West Ham. It was his change into midfield for Phil Foden, gave a bit more solidity, a bit more shape in that midfield. Nothing against Foden, just that the game required maybe a bit more of a defensive minded player, but it also allowed Bernardo to go over to the right, and that was where he got on the end of Julian Alvarez's lovely scoop, scored the goal that put City ahead, and then he got a ball from Nunes and fed Erling Haaland to score. Haaland, of course, could have had 5 goals at West Ham, but only got 1. And I think it's that sort of performance that City will take, that, you know, they're up against it. They admitted that they were angry. Guardiola said that he came into the dressing room at half-time of the London Stadium and they were angry because they were 1-0 behind, but he had to say, listen guys, you're playing well, you're creating a lot of chances. And it was that sort of experience that I think City leaned upon to get through and win that game. They're going to have to do the same thing against Red Star. A little bit of an unknown team just because it's a new opponent for City. They don't often play teams from the Serbian league, for example, so it's going to be an interesting game. But when you've got an injury crisis, when you've got lots of key players missing, you do want a home game against a team that you should be beating first up. So the players will be out shortly. Behind me, we'll see if anyone is there who we weren't expecting or not. You can find all that on the Manchester Evening News, but we are expecting the same squad that travelled to West Ham to be training here today. No Kovacic, no Grealish, no Stones, and that will restrict the options that Guardiola has going into the game against Red Star. But the message is clear: win your home games in the Champions League, win 1 or 2 of your away ones, qualify for the last 16 first, and then only then can you start thinking about defending it. But the overall theme is that City want to not just be a one-year wonder in the Champions League. They want to be going and winning it multiple years in a row and just show how good this team is. But given all these injuries, they're going to have to be under pressure a little bit to get off to a good start.